The restaurant was busy, filled with soft chatter, the clinking of glasses, and the occasional laugh that rose above the general hum of conversation. It was the kind of place where the walls seemed to reflect wealth and elegance, and where every table was occupied by people who had power, influence, or both. She moved through the crowded dining room with practiced ease, balancing trays of food and glasses of wine. To the patrons, she was just another waitress, part of the invisible machinery that kept their luxury running smoothly. But there was more to her than anyone knew. Beneath the simple apron and polite smile lay a world of music, a passion that had been growing quietly since childhood. Her apartment was small and plain, far from the opulence she served every day, but it was filled with reminders of her love for music. Old sheet music stacked carefully on a shelf, a worn metronome, and a slightly scratched but well-loved piano that had been her companion for years. Every evening, after the restaurant closed and the silverware was polished and stored, she would return to that piano and let her fingers dance across the keys. Music was her escape, a world where she could be seen for who she really was, not just the girl taking orders and clearing tables. She had grown up in a neighborhood where opportunities were limited, but she had been lucky to have a music teacher who recognized her talent. He had encouraged her to practice, to imagine herself in front of crowds, and to believe that her music could move people. But life had a way of making dreams seem distant. Bills needed to be paid, her family needed help, and the reality of the world often pressed against the beauty of her imagination. Still, she held on to her music like a secret treasure, practicing in stolen moments, humming softly while washing dishes or setting tables. At the restaurant, she was known for her calm demeanor and efficiency. She could carry a tray full of glasses through a crowded room without spilling a drop. She remembered every regular's order and greeted them with a warm smile that never faltered, no matter how long her shift had been. But despite her competence, she sometimes felt invisible, like she was walking through life in the background while the world moved in the spotlight. Yet, every now and then, when she caught the sound of the piano in the restaurant lobby or remembered a melody she had been working on, a spark would ignite in her heart. She imagined a day when someone might notice, when her music would speak louder than her apron and tray. She often watched the patrons with curiosity, noticing the little things that made them human. The way an older couple held hands, the way a child laughed at something simple, the hurried glance of someone buried in work even while sitting in a luxurious chair. She knew that behind the glittering glasses and elegant clothes, these people had stories too, and she hoped, secretly, that one day her story would touch them, just as their lives touched hers in small, fleeting moments. The restaurant's piano sat in the corner, polished and gleaming, often played by a professional pianist for special occasions. Sometimes she would pause while clearing a nearby table, listening to the music float through the room. Her fingers itched to play, to add her own notes, to create something that made people stop and listen. But she always stopped herself, thinking it wasn't her place, that she was just a waitress. The piano seemed both close and far away, a symbol of the life she longed for but didn't yet dare to claim. Her coworkers knew her as quiet and dependable. She rarely spoke unless she needed to, but when she did, there was a sincerity in her voice that people remembered. She formed small friendships, sharing quick laughs during breaks or swapping stories about the challenges of the job. But always, she carried her secret with her. The music that lived in her hands and heart, waiting for the right moment to be heard. It wasn't something she could tell anyone at work. People might smile politely, maybe encourage her, but they wouldn't understand the depth of her connection with the piano, the hours spent alone practicing, the way music gave her courage. One evening, after a long shift, she lingered near the piano while the restaurant was winding down. The last patrons had left, the lights dimmed to a soft glow, and the cleaning crew moved quietly through the room. She touched the keys lightly, feeling the familiar coolness under her fingers. She played a few notes, then a melody she had been perfecting, letting the sound fill the empty space. It was a private moment, but in it, she felt alive, fully herself. The music carried her away from the tables and the trays, from the polite smiles and the constant movement, to a place where she was free to dream. Her life outside the restaurant was modest but full in its own way. She saved carefully, often skipping small luxuries so she could afford sheet music or lessons when possible. She walked to work most days, enjoying the quiet streets before the city fully woke, letting the world awaken around her as she imagined the music she would play that evening. She thought about the audience she might never have, the people who would never know the passion in her hands, and yet she kept practicing. It was a promise to herself, a way to hold on to something that was hers alone. Sometimes, she imagined herself performing in front of a crowd, people stopping whatever they were doing just to listen. She imagined the surprise in their eyes when they realized the pianist was not a famous performer, but someone like them. Someone who had struggled and worked and dreamed quietly. Those thoughts gave her hope and fueled her determination, even when the day-to-day work seemed endless. She believed, deep down, that her moment would come, that her music would one day break through the ordinary and touch lives in a way that nothing else could. That evening, as she closed the restaurant and finally walked home, she felt a familiar mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The streets were quiet, the air cool, and the city lights reflected in the puddles left from a recent rain. She carried her bag, her apron tucked neatly inside, and her mind replayed the melodies she had played on the piano. Each note was a reminder of her own resilience, of the dreams she refused to let go of. Even in a life that often seemed small and invisible, she was creating beauty, and that thought gave her strength. Though the world often saw her as a waitress, moving quietly through the luxury and privilege of others, she carried within her a talent and a passion that could not be contained. Music was her voice, her story, and her hope. Every day, every shift, every tray she carried and every smile she offered was part of the journey that would eventually lead her to the moment when the world would finally hear her. Until then, she played for herself, for the quiet satisfaction of creation, and for the dream that one day, her music would amaze more than just her own imagination. It would amaze the world. The restaurant was alive with anticipation that evening. A private gathering had been announced weeks ago, and the wealthy guests had arrived dressed in their finest attire, each carrying an air of expectation. They spoke softly, ordered extravagant dishes, and occasionally laughed in polite bursts. The atmosphere was polished and refined, and the staff moved like clockwork, ensuring everything ran seamlessly. She moved through the tables as usual, her hands steady, her mind focused, though her heart beat a little faster than normal. Something about tonight felt different, though she couldn't put her finger on why. The restaurant manager had been pacing near the entrance, his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in hurried whispers. He looked frustrated, glancing over at the grand piano in the corner more than once. A quick glance confirmed her suspicion. The pianist who was supposed to perform tonight had called in, unable to make it due to a sudden illness. The announcement caused a ripple of tension in the staff room, whispers passing from one employee to another. Who would take their place? How could they maintain the elegance and sophistication expected by such an audience? The thought alone made her stomach twist with nerves. It wasn't her responsibility, she reminded herself, yet she couldn't ignore the piano calling out to her from across the room. The manager noticed her hovering near the piano while wiping down a nearby table. He paused, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. He had seen her hum while working before, caught her fingers tapping a melody across the counter during slow moments. There was something different about her, a quiet grace that set her apart from the rest of the staff. His eyes softened slightly as he approached her. "Could you play tonight?" he asked, almost hesitantly. "The pianist can't make it. It's a private event, very important guests. I know it's sudden, but can you do it?" Her breath caught in her throat. She froze for a moment, staring at him as if he had asked the impossible. Her mind raced with doubts and fears. She had never performed in front of an audience like this before. What if she made a mistake? What if she embarrassed herself? And yet, deep inside, a spark of excitement flared. This was her chance, the very moment she had dreamed about during long evenings alone at her piano. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. I can try," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the ambient noise of the restaurant. The manager's face broke into a small smile of relief. "Thank you," he said. "You won't regret it. Just do what you do best." Back in the kitchen, she closed her eyes for a moment, taking deep breaths to steady herself. The hum of the restaurant around her faded as her mind filled with music. She imagined the keys beneath her fingers, the notes flowing out smoothly, and the feeling of creating something beautiful that would resonate beyond the confines of the room. Every doubt and fear still lingered, but the excitement began to outweigh them. This was her chance to step into the world she had imagined countless times. She approached the piano, her hands trembling slightly as they hovered over the keys. The polished wood gleamed under the soft lighting, almost like it was waiting for her to unlock its voice. She lowered herself onto the bench and closed her eyes, letting the silence of the room guide her. For a few seconds, she allowed herself to simply breathe, feeling the weight of the moment pressing on her shoulders and the thrill of possibility lifting her spirits. Her fingers found the keys. At first, the notes were hesitant, unsure, testing the waters. But slowly, as she settled into the rhythm of her own confidence, the music began to flow. A soft melody started, simple at first, but carrying with it an unmistakable emotion. The restaurant continued around her, diners chatting, glasses clinking, but gradually, the sound of her playing drew attention. Some paused mid-conversation, glancing toward the piano, curiosity in their eyes. The melody was subtle but captivating, a gentle pull that demanded attention. She played with a mixture of focus and feeling, letting the music tell a story she had never shared with anyone before. It spoke of longing, of perseverance, of small victories won in quiet spaces. The notes rose and fell, dancing through the room, wrapping around the elegant tables, the soft laughter, and the gleaming silverware. Patrons who had been speaking moments ago found themselves quiet, listening intently, caught in the unexpected beauty of the moment. The manager watched from a distance, his expression a mixture of pride and amazement. He had seen her work tirelessly behind the scenes, but he had never witnessed the full extent of her talent. The other staff members peeked from the kitchen doorway, eyes wide, sharing whispers of astonishment. None of them had realized that the quiet, dependable waitress they had worked alongside for months held such a gift. And yet, here she was, commanding the room not with words or status, but with music. Her confidence grew with each passing note. She felt herself becoming one with the piano, her fingers moving instinctively, expressing feelings she hadn't been able to put into words. She remembered her childhood, the long hours spent practicing, the encouragement of her first music teacher, and the countless times she had dreamed of this very moment. It was all coming together now, the past and present merging into a single, breathtaking performance. Guests began to take notice more fully, their polite attention turning into genuine fascination. Conversations ceased, and even the most distracted patrons leaned slightly forward, drawn in by the melody. Some exchanged amazed glances, quietly acknowledging that this was not just background music. It was a performance that demanded recognition. The piano, once just a piece of furniture in the corner, had become the center of the room, a conduit for emotion and storytelling. She allowed herself a brief smile as she continued to play, feeling a mixture of exhilaration and relief. This was what she had been waiting for, the moment where her talent could shine in its purest form. She felt the audience's eyes on her, but rather than fear, it gave her courage. She poured every ounce of herself into the music, letting her hands tell the story that her voice had never spoken. Hours of practice and years of quiet dedication had led her to this point, and she realized that every moment of doubt, every day spent serving tables while dreaming of something greater, had been worth it. The music carried through the room, weaving a tapestry of sound that touched hearts and minds alike. Patrons who had arrived expecting a simple evening of fine dining found themselves witnessing something extraordinary, an unplanned display of pure talent and passion. As she played the final notes, the room seemed to hold its breath for a heartbeat, reluctant to break the spell. Then, slowly, a ripple of appreciation began to build. The guests started to clap, softly at first, then with growing enthusiasm, acknowledging the unexpected brilliance that had filled the space. She sat back slightly, breathing heavily but smiling, overwhelmed by the response. The music had spoken louder than her fears, louder than her doubts, louder than the walls that had kept her hidden for so long. The manager approached her once more, his eyes shining with admiration. "You were incredible," he said, his voice nearly lost in the lingering applause. "I had no idea. I never imagined." Words failed him, but his expression said it all. The other staff members quietly joined in, offering congratulations, some with tears in their eyes. They had seen her in a new light, and so had the crowd. The evening ended with conversations buzzing about the performance, the mysterious waitress who had captured everyone's attention. Guests lingered longer than planned, sharing whispers and praises, unable to stop talking about the unexpected musical talent they had witnessed. She quietly collected her things, letting the compliments wash over her without fully absorbing them yet. The realization that she had stepped out of the shadows and into the spotlight was only beginning to sink in. As she left the restaurant that night, the cool air felt different against her skin. The streets were quiet, the city lights reflecting softly in the puddles, and for the first time, she walked with a sense of purpose and pride. She had taken a risk, seized an opportunity, and revealed a part of herself that had long been hidden. And in doing so, she had not only amazed the crowd, but had also discovered a new level of confidence and belief in her own abilities. That night, she returned home to her small apartment and sat at her own piano, playing the melodies again, reliving the evening through her fingertips. The experience had changed her, not just because others had noticed her talent, but because she had proven to herself that she was capable of so much more than she had ever imagined. She played late into the night, each note a reminder that dreams could be realized if one had courage, determination, and the willingness to step forward when opportunity knocked. The stage, however grand or modest, was hers now to claim, and she would never look back. The moment her fingers touched the keys, the restaurant seemed to shift. The usual sounds, the soft clatter of dishes, the murmured conversations, the occasional laugh, faded into the background. In their place arose a melody that was delicate at first, like the whisper of wind through trees, and then richer, more commanding, carrying with it emotion that no words could express. She closed her eyes, letting herself be completely absorbed in the music. Each note was a story, each chord a feeling she had carried inside for years, waiting for the right moment to be heard. She played with a mixture of focus and freedom. Her hands moved effortlessly across the keys, drawing out nuances she had never dared to try before. The music rose and fell, soft then strong, gentle then powerful, echoing through the elegant dining room. The wealthy guests, initially expecting a polite background performance, began to take notice. Conversations ceased, and one by one, heads turned toward the corner where the waitress now commanded the piano. They had expected refinement and sophistication, but what they heard was raw talent, sincerity, and emotion that cut through the barriers of wealth and status. Her heart raced with excitement, yet she remained calm on the outside. Every glance she cast in the room felt charged with connection. Some guests exchanged astonished looks, hardly daring to believe that someone they had seen merely serving tables could play with such depth. Her fingers danced across the keys, bringing forth melodies that swelled with joy, softened with sadness, and shimmered with hope. For a moment, the world beyond the piano ceased to exist. There was only the music and the silent understanding that it carried. The staff watched from a distance, their eyes wide with awe. They had known she was talented, but no one could have imagined the level of skill and emotion she could bring forth when given the chance. Even the manager, who had believed in her, felt a surge of pride that was almost overwhelming. He had been right to trust her, and yet the experience surpassed all expectations. The room, filled with people accustomed to the best in life, was completely captivated by her performance. She moved through the piece, letting her fingers find their own path across the keys. Every note resonated with her own story. The years of hard work, the quiet evenings spent practicing, the dreams that had often felt just out of reach. The audience could feel it, even if they could not see it. They felt her courage, her persistence, and the beauty that had grown quietly within her. Her music became a bridge, connecting her life with theirs, transcending the differences in wealth, background, and experience. Some guests shifted in their seats, leaning forward, eyes fixed on the piano. Their polite masks had fallen away, replaced by wonder and admiration. The melody lingered in the air, twisting around the chandeliers, sliding across the polished floors, wrapping the room in a warmth that had nothing to do with the crystal glasses or golden cutlery. They were not just listening. They were feeling, experiencing the story she was telling without words. It was a rare moment, one that many of them would remember long after the evening had ended. Her confidence grew with every measure. What had started as a tentative performance became an immersive experience. She played not to impress, not to seek approval, but because it was her nature to express herself through music. And in that honesty, the performance became irresistible. Patrons who had initially dismissed her as just another member of the staff found themselves completely captivated, drawn into the narrative she wove with each touch of the keys. Time seemed to bend around her music. Minutes felt like seconds, and seconds stretched into what seemed like eternity. Every note was deliberate, every pause meaningful. She experimented with dynamics, with tempo, letting her emotions guide her hands. The piece swelled into a crescendo, and the room was completely silent except for the sound of the piano. No one breathed, no one whispered. They were fully present, hanging on to every note, feeling the music as though it were speaking directly to them. Her mind wandered briefly to her past. The quiet nights at her small piano, the teacher who had encouraged her, the long hours spent practicing when no one was watching. All those moments led to this one. It was as if the piano had absorbed every ounce of her effort, and now it was returning it amplified, filling the room with beauty that surprised even her. She felt a sense of liberation, of purpose fulfilled. This was why she played, why she had persisted, why she had nurtured her talent quietly for so many years. The music was her voice, and tonight it was heard. A few of the guests held their hands to their chests, as though the music was touching them physically. Others leaned back in their chairs, eyes closed, letting the sound wash over them. Even the youngest diners, who had been fidgeting moments before, were still mesmerized by the flow of melody. It was impossible to ignore. The room had been transformed from a gathering of affluent strangers into a shared experience of wonder and emotion. As the piece drew toward its final measures, her fingers moved with a fluidity that seemed almost effortless. She had reached a place where she no longer had to think. The music simply flowed through her. Every emotion she had ever felt, the longing, the hope, the determination, was poured into the notes, and the audience could feel it. Their eyes were wide, their breaths held, and some had even begun to exchange glances that said, without words, that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The last note lingered in the air, vibrating softly as though reluctant to leave. Silence followed, thick and complete, filled with awe and disbelief. The room seemed frozen in that moment, each person holding onto the echo of her performance. For a heartbeat, no one moved, no one spoke. It was a rare silence, one that held reverence and amazement in equal measure. They had expected polite entertainment. Instead, they had received a revelation. Slowly, as if waking from a dream, the audience began to react. A hand clapped, softly at first, then another joined, and soon the room erupted in applause. It was enthusiastic, genuine, heartfelt, and it seemed to shake the walls with its intensity. Some guests leapt to their feet, others clapped and cheered, all expressing admiration for the unexpected brilliance that had filled the room. The energy was electric, the air charged with excitement, and she felt it all wash over her. She sat back slightly, catching her breath, a mixture of relief and joy on her face. The applause continued, filling the room with warmth and recognition. For the first time, she truly understood the power of her talent, the impact of sharing her music with others. She had stepped out of the shadows, and in doing so, had touched hearts in a way she had only imagined in quiet moments. The manager approached once more, his expression radiant. "That was incredible," he said, voice nearly drowned by the ongoing applause. "I knew you had talent, but I had no idea. You've left everyone speechless." The other staff members gathered nearby, some with tears in their eyes, offering congratulations and sharing in her triumph. They had seen her perseverance, her dedication, and now the world around them had witnessed the result. The evening continued, but the performance remained the central memory of the night. Guests could not stop talking about the waitress who had amazed them, the music that had captivated everyone, and the sheer authenticity of her expression. They were moved, inspired, and profoundly affected by the unexpected gift they had received. Even long after the evening ended, conversations continued, memories replayed, and the story of the talented waitress spread quietly among the elite who had been present. For her, the experience was transformative. It was not just about the applause, the admiration, or the surprise. It was about discovering the strength and beauty of her own voice. The music had allowed her to express herself fully, to break free from the invisible barriers that had defined her life until now. It was a reminder that talent, courage, and passion could create moments of magic, even in the most unexpected places. When she finally left the restaurant that night, the streets were quiet, and the city lights reflected in puddles from an earlier rain. She walked slowly, savoring the memory of the performance, the look of astonishment on the faces around her, and the realization that her life had changed in an instant. The music had opened a door, and she had stepped through it. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet confidence that would carry her forward, and the certainty that her journey had only just begun. Returning home, she sat at her own piano, replaying the melodies in her mind and under her fingers. She realized that while the performance had amazed others, it had also amazed her. She had seen what she was capable of, and that knowledge would fuel her for the days and years ahead. The music, her faithful companion, had led her into a world where her talent was recognized, her dreams were valid, and her courage had created a moment of unforgettable beauty as the final notes of the piano piece faded into the air. A heavy silence settled over the restaurant. It was a silence that was almost physical, as though everyone had collectively held their breath, unsure of how to react to the unexpected brilliance they had just witnessed. Guests sat frozen in their seats, eyes wide, hands hovering over their glasses. For a moment, the room seemed suspended in time, the music lingering long after it had stopped, filling every corner with its resonance. Slowly, one hand clapped, then another, and then, as if released from a spell, the entire room erupted into applause. It was enthusiastic, genuine, and long-lasting. The sound echoed off the high ceilings and marble floors, and it was impossible not to be swept up in it. The wealthy patrons, who had spent countless evenings in fine dining establishments, rarely reacted with such raw admiration. Some stood up, clapping their hands, faces shining with surprise and delight. Others exchanged amazed glances, trying to comprehend that this remarkable performance had come from the young waitress who had served them moments before. She sat at the piano, chest heaving, hands trembling slightly from the effort and emotion of her performance. For a moment, she could hardly believe it herself. The applause was thunderous, yet she felt a quiet pride swell within her. It wasn't just about the recognition. It was about knowing that she had taken a chance, that she had stepped into a role she had always dreamed of but never dared to claim. The audience's reaction was confirmation that her talent mattered, that her music had the power to move people. Some of the guests approached her cautiously, as if approaching something precious. Their words were filled with admiration, tinged with disbelief. "I can't believe it," one man said, shaking his head. "You've completely surprised everyone here." Another guest added, "Your talent. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible." They had expected polite entertainment, perhaps a familiar performance from a trained professional, and instead, they had been captivated by something authentic, something deeply human and moving. The staff, who had been watching from a distance, were equally stunned. They had known she was talented, but seeing her command the attention of such a prestigious audience was breathtaking. Some whispered to each other, sharing their amazement, while others wiped tears from their eyes. The manager, standing near the edge of the room, could hardly contain his pride. He had always believed in her abilities, but this moment exceeded even his highest expectations. He stepped forward, smiling, ready to offer praise, though the room itself seemed to be celebrating her already. A few patrons lingered near the piano, hesitant to leave, wanting just a few more notes or perhaps a word of explanation. They were curious about her story, about the life that had brought her to this moment. How could someone so young, so unassuming, possess such extraordinary talent? They were drawn not just to the music, but to the person who had created it, realizing that true skill and emotion can come from anywhere, regardless of social status or appearance. The applause began to subside, replaced by quiet murmurs of appreciation. Guests discussed the performance in hushed tones, marveling at the seamless combination of technical skill and heartfelt expression. "Where did she learn to play like that?" someone whispered. "I've never heard anything so moving in my life," another replied. The conversations buzzed with excitement, the story of the young waitress spreading quickly across the room. She had become the center of attention, not because of wealth or prestige, but because of talent, courage, and authenticity. The music producer, who had been seated quietly near the back of the room, approached her cautiously. He had been observing, listening intently, and now he stepped forward, his eyes filled with curiosity and admiration. "You have something special," he said, his voice low and serious. "I would love to talk to you about opportunities to perform professionally. This is not something I see every day." Her heart skipped a beat. The possibility of taking her music beyond the restaurant, beyond the private gatherings, into the world of professional performance was overwhelming. She had dreamed of this for years, and now it seemed closer than ever. The producer's words validated all the hard work, all the quiet practice, all the moments she had dedicated to her craft in solitude. It was a turning point, a glimpse of a future she had long imagined but had thought impossible. Other guests, noticing the producer speaking to her, gathered around, eager to offer their own congratulations. They complimented her technique, her emotion, and her courage. The applause returned in smaller bursts, punctuated by laughter and joyful chatter. The room had transformed. It was no longer just a dining area for the elite. It had become a space where art and humanity intersected, where a single performance had bridged social divides and reminded everyone present of the power of talent and passion. She felt a mixture of humility and pride as she listened to the compliments. Her hands still hovered near the keys, as if reluctant to leave the piano, the instrument that had allowed her to express herself so fully. The audience had been moved, not by fame or status, but by the honesty of her performance. That realization was profound. She had touched people's hearts in a way that few could, and it had come from a place of authenticity and courage. The manager finally approached, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've done something remarkable tonight," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "I knew you had it in you, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined. You've amazed them all." She nodded, a smile spreading across her face. Words failed her in that moment, but the look in her eyes said everything. She had stepped into a new reality, one in which her talent could no longer be overlooked. The audience, the staff, even she herself had witnessed a transformation. She had moved from the background, the quiet observer, to the center of attention, a performer whose music resonated far beyond the confines of the room. The evening continued, yet the performance remained the highlight. Guests spoke of her talent long after dessert was served, sharing their astonishment with one another. They praised her skill, her emotion, and the courage it took to perform on such short notice. She had not only entertained them, she had left a lasting impression, one that would be remembered and recounted in gatherings long after that night. Even as the crowd began to disperse, she remained near the piano, allowing herself a few moments of reflection. The experience had changed her perception of herself, of her abilities, and of the possibilities that lay ahead. She realized that talent and dedication could open doors that might otherwise remain closed. She had taken a chance, embraced an opportunity, and in doing so had proven to herself and others that she was capable of extraordinary things. The producer continued speaking with her, discussing potential performances, recordings, and ways to bring her music to a wider audience. She listened intently, heart racing, imagining the new paths that might unfold before her. The crowd's admiration had been powerful, but the possibility of turning this moment into a lasting career was exhilarating. It was a reminder that courage, skill, and passion, when combined, could create opportunities that once seemed impossible. Her co-workers gathered around, sharing in her excitement and joy. They had supported her quietly, watched her practice in secret, and now they could see her dream taking shape in real time. The bonds of friendship and shared experience added to the triumph, making the moment even more meaningful. Together, they celebrated the realization of a talent that had long been hidden, now fully revealed and recognized. As she finally left the restaurant that night, the city streets seemed brighter, the air lighter. The memory of the performance lingered, a warm glow that would not fade. She walked with a sense of pride and purpose, knowing that her life had changed in a single evening, and that her music had found its audience. The applause, the admiration, and the recognition were not just fleeting. They were a promise of a future filled with possibility, a future that she could now shape with her own hands. Back in her small apartment, she sat at her own piano, replaying the melodies in her mind and under her fingers. She thought of the faces in the restaurant, the expressions of awe and joy, and the producer's words of encouragement. The night had been more than a performance. It had been a revelation, a reminder of the power of passion, perseverance, and authenticity. She knew that the journey ahead would have challenges, but for the first time, she felt truly prepared to embrace them. Her music had not only amazed the crowd, it had revealed her potential, opening doors she had only dreamed of walking through. In the days following that unforgettable evening, her life began to shift in ways she had never imagined. Word of her performance spread quickly among the elite guests, each retelling the story with astonishment and admiration. Invitations began to arrive, some private performances at exclusive gatherings, others offers to collaborate with musicians and producers who had heard of her talent. She opened each letter with a mix of nervousness and excitement, carefully reading each opportunity as if testing whether her dreams were really within reach. The producer who had approached her that night remained in contact, sharing plans for recording sessions, small concerts, and ways to develop her skills professionally. He spoke of the potential she had, the rare combination of technical ability and emotional depth that could set her apart in the music world. She listened intently, absorbing every word, every suggestion, and imagining the possibilities. It was overwhelming, but in a way that felt exhilarating rather than frightening. For the first time, she felt that her talent could truly lead her somewhere. Her work at the restaurant continued, but it had changed for her. Each shift, she carried herself with newfound confidence, knowing that she had been seen, appreciated, and recognized for something far beyond the routine tasks of serving tables. Customers who had witnessed her performance often asked her to play, eager to hear her music again. She welcomed these moments with a quiet smile, happy to share her gift, but also careful to maintain the balance between her work and the new opportunities emerging in her life. In her small apartment, she continued to practice, now with a new sense of purpose. She explored more challenging pieces, experimenting with different styles and techniques, always seeking to express herself more fully. Her piano, once a companion in solitude, had become a tool for growth and a bridge to the world beyond her immediate surroundings. Every evening, as she played, she could feel herself growing stronger, more confident, and more capable of taking the next steps in her musical journey. Her friends and family noticed the change in her as well. They saw the light in her eyes, the excitement in her movements, and the determination that had always been present but had now found an outlet. They offered their support, encouragement, and sometimes gentle reminders to stay grounded amidst the flurry of new opportunities. Their presence provided a comforting anchor, ensuring that she remained true to herself even as her life began to expand in unexpected directions. One afternoon, she received an invitation to perform at a local concert hall. The event would be attended by music enthusiasts and professionals, and it was an opportunity to showcase her talent to a broader audience. She felt a mixture of nerves and excitement as she prepared, meticulously planning each piece she would perform, rehearsing tirelessly to ensure that she could convey the depth of emotion she felt in her music. The evening arrived, and as she stepped onto the stage, she felt the same familiar thrill that had accompanied her the first time she played in front of an audience. The room was silent, attentive, and waiting. She began to play, her fingers moving with precision and passion. The audience was captivated, drawn into the story she told through the keys. They listened intently, some closing their eyes to absorb the full impact of the music, others leaning forward in their seats, unable to look away. She poured herself into every note, expressing joy, sorrow, longing, and hope. When she finished, the applause was overwhelming, and she felt a sense of accomplishment that surpassed anything she had imagined. This was a new chapter in her life, one that she had earned through years of dedication, perseverance, and courage. As her reputation grew, she began to receive offers to perform in more prominent venues, collaborate with other talented musicians, and even record her own music. Each opportunity was carefully considered, and she approached them with the same thoughtful attention that had guided her through years of practice and preparation. She learned to navigate the challenges of a new lifestyle, balancing her desire for artistic growth with the practical realities of work, finances, and personal life. Every step forward reinforced her confidence, reminding her that she had the ability to shape her own path. Through it all, she remained humble and grounded. She never forgot the quiet moments at her small piano, the long hours spent practicing alone, and the first time she had dared to perform in front of an audience. Those experiences had shaped her, giving her resilience, perspective, and gratitude. She approached each new opportunity with a sense of responsibility, knowing that her talent was not just for herself, but for the people who would listen, feel, and be moved by her music. Her story became an inspiration to those around her. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers who had heard of her journey were moved by her perseverance and success. They saw in her a reflection of their own dreams, a reminder that talent and passion, when nurtured and shared, could break through barriers and create extraordinary moments. She was no longer just a waitress with a hidden talent. She had become a symbol of hope, determination, and the transformative power of music. Despite the growing demands on her time and energy, she made it a priority to continue sharing her music in personal and meaningful ways. She returned occasionally to the restaurant, not just to perform but to connect with the people who had been part of her journey from the beginning. She played for small gatherings, private moments, and charitable events, always remembering the joy of bringing music to those who might not have expected it. These experiences reinforced her belief that music was a gift, one to be shared, nurtured, and celebrated. In her quiet moments, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from long evenings spent practicing alone, to the unexpected chance to perform in front of a prestigious audience, to the recognition and opportunities that followed. Every experience had contributed to her growth. She understood that talent alone was not enough. Courage, persistence, and the willingness to embrace opportunity were equally important. Her journey had taught her to believe in herself, to trust her instincts, and to value the power of her own voice. As she looked to the future, she felt a sense of excitement and possibility. She dreamed of performing in concert halls around the world, collaborating with artists she admired, and continuing to develop her unique musical voice. Each day brought new challenges and opportunities, and she approached them with a combination of determination, humility, and passion. The journey ahead was unknown, but she was ready, confident that her talent, her hard work, and her love for music would guide her along the way. Ultimately, her story was about more than a single performance or the recognition that followed. It was about perseverance, about holding on to dreams even when they seemed distant, about taking chances and stepping into the unknown. It was about the quiet strength that comes from pursuing a passion relentlessly, the courage to be seen, and the joy of sharing something beautiful with the world. Her music had amazed a crowd, but more importantly, It had changed her life, opening doors to possibilities she had only imagined in her most hopeful dreams. And so, she continued to play, to practice, to share her gift with others. Every note she played was a reminder of her journey, of the moments that had led her here, and of the endless potential that lay ahead. Her life had been transformed by a combination of talent, opportunity, and courage, and she embraced it fully, knowing that this was only the beginning of a story that would continue to unfold, filled with music, inspiration, and the unending pursuit of her dreams.